Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty, justice for all. Thank you, everybody. Mr. Priest, I believe you have something to read. I think you might know it by heart, but I believe you have something to read.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. At this point, I feel like I do know it by heart, but not quite. So I'll keep reading. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 20, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, public hearing of the Town of Burlington Board of Selectmen is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but the public can listen and/or view this meeting while in progress as broadcast on BCAT Government Cable Access Television, BCAT Government Coverage Facebook Live page, or by using the link provided in the agenda for our WebEx Cisco online meeting, or via phone at 408-418-9388. Meeting number 129-044-2218. Members of the public attending this meeting virtually will be allowed to make comments if they wish to do so during the portion of the hearing designated for public comment by commenting on the BCAT Government Coverage Facebook Live page, the chat function on the WebEx virtual meeting, or via telephone at 781-270-1635. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sagarino, so before we get started tonight, gentlemen, I'm going to do this at the beginning of the meeting. Over the course of the weekend, we had a lieutenant retired from the Burlington Police Department, Walter Ronnie Bevis, if you know him, passed away. Ron was a good friend to a lot of people, myself included in that group. I can remember the times that we went down there and at the shop and played live poker. We had a good time. He was one hell of a gentleman. So before I allow anybody to speak, I would love to take a moment of silence for Mr. Bevis at this point. So if we could have one moment of silence, please. Thank you, everybody. I know that we all know him. We all knew him. He was one of those guys in life that if you had met him, you were a better person. He just made everybody smile, made everybody laugh. I could go on and on, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to let each one of you speak on his behalf, and I'm going to start out with Mr. Tiggis. You worked with him, so Jimmy, if you have anything to say about Walter himself.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not only was he a great person, but he was also a great police officer. I can tell you from experience that whenever there was a situation out on the streets or at a location, man could handle logistics like no one had ever seen. He knew how to get detours set up. He knew how to access resources instantly. It was almost scripted in his mind. He was able to function that quickly, that fast, and a solid decision maker, and huge loss for everybody who knew him. And you know, his family is a wonderful family, but I don't want to tie it up. But he was a great man, both personally and professionally. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, I knew him through the Office of Veteran Services. He would come up and just sit and talk for no particular reason sometimes, and it was a pleasure to know him as a police officer and as a gentleman.
Thank you. Mr. Runyon.
Yeah, thank you for that opportunity, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you recognized Ron and his family. He's been a great guy. I think everybody in town knew Ron Bevis, and he was certainly a mentor to everybody that came on the job after he did, and he continued to be even after he retired. So again, my condolences to the family of Ron Bevis.
Thank you. Mr. Priest, he probably chased you through the neighborhoods at some point, so
I'll say this. He just flat out, he was a good man. Actually, he and I only had a handful of interactions, throughout my time here in Burlington, and obviously he worked with my father, and he would always make it a point to at least say hi, a wave on a detail, passing, in town, whatever it was. He just, just truly a good, kind, individual. And obviously, if just our words are enough to relay it, he will be sorely missed. And so obviously my condolences go to his family and all his friends. And, it's never easy, but, he will be missed. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Sagarino, about Walter Bevis, I know you've worked with him in the past, so if you'd like to speak on anything with Walter, and then we'll move on to the meeting. I know
Believe it or not, Mr. Chairman, I never had the opportunity to meet Lieutenant Bevis. So unfortunately, I don't have any great words to share. Condolences to his family, just from everybody who I've spoken to about his passing. Everybody generally talked about what a great person he was. So I'm very sorry for his family.
Thank you. Like I said in the beginning of this, I firmly believe this. If you were a friend of Walter's, he would drop everything to come help you. He would, if you knew him, you're a better person because of it. He was just that great of a person. My condolences to the family, his wife, Sandy, his kids. I'm going to leave it at that before I get emotional. Mr. Sagarino, you're up. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first agenda item, we have Town Clerk Amy Warfield here to request a vote from the board related to the upcoming town election. Amy?
Thank you, Paul, and thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, the legislature and the governor have been working on modifying a bill that was passed in December that will extend the ability to have early voting, vote by mail for our town election.
There we go.
The original deadline was set to end on March 31st. And since our election is on April 10th, we wouldn't have been able to do these things. I have sent on to you a calendar that kind of shows the time frame. I did find out just as I was leaving the office that the governor still has not yet signed this, but their feeling is he will sign it. He's been out checking out schools and things like that the past 2 days. And so even if he doesn't sign it, this would still allow us then to do in-person absentee voting during those days at Grandview Farm. So basically the timeline is you all would vote on it tonight, and then that would make it possible for us to set up some kind of in-person voting April 5th through April 8th. And I'm anticipating that will be early voting. And after the bill gets signed, we would be able to then start to use the vote by mail application, which allows anyone, basically no excuse absentee, would allow anybody to get a vote by mail ballot. And then there are some deadlines there. The one deadline, just to kind of get it on the record, April 6th would be the deadline for requesting a vote by mail application. And then the last day to vote in person would be April 9th at noon. Any questions?
Yes, Amy, I have one quick question. Could you go over those last two dates quickly for me?
The what?
The last two dates?
Sure.
Because at first
April
you said April
6th.
5th through the 8th.
Yeah, so the early voting in person will be April 5th through the 8th. Regular business hours, but it will be up at Grandview Farm. The last day for someone to request a vote by mail using the application, not in person, is April 6th. And then the last day, Friday, April 9th, that will be absentee voting until noon.
Great. Okay, thank you. Just wanted to write it down. We'll start. Mr. Tiggs, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy, just one quick question. Does that mean Friday, April 9th, the way I'm looking at it here, it says will be absentee. Does that mean it's, that day is no longer considered an early voting? It's just absentee only?
It's absentee in person, which basically then uses the criteria that somebody is not able to get to the polls on the next day on Saturday. That's the way the law is written, unfortunately. So that's the way we have to spell it out.
So technically, everybody voting on Friday, April 9th will be an absentee ballot as opposed to an early voting.
Well, the interesting thing is it's all the same ballot, but yes,
Well,
technically.
that was my follow-up question is there any longer a difference between an absentee or an early voting?
No, part of the legislation says we can use the same ballot. So I did not have to order two different separate sets of ballots. I could order one set of ballots that says early voting, absentee at the top of it. So that does save us some money. If I had to purchase two separate sets of ballots, that would have been a lot more expensive. But it's what they do with them. With early voting in person, all they have to do is they check in on our electronic system. They are given a ballot and an envelope. They vote the ballot. They put it in the envelope. With absentee applications, they have to fill out an application and then fill out the envelope and the ballot.
All right, thank you. That clears it up. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Hogan, any questions?
Is this just for this year, Amy, or is this ongoing after this?
This is just for this year. This piece of legislation was just, it was originally targeted in December to just handle elections in February and March. And the clerks had promoted that we really need it. There are more communities that vote April, May, and June. And so it just covers this year. What we are now working on with legislation is to make this a permanent thing. If we're going to do it, we need to do it. But that takes the legislature rewriting all of, a good section of the election law. And they are currently working on it. I must admit, or I must make sure that I say that both Cindy Friedman and Ken Gordon have been very receptive to all of my emails. I've been kind of been knocking on their doorstep a lot this past week and a half. So they understand what the needs are and what my desires and what the desires of the voters are. So I think that it will become a permanent fixture.
And just to follow up, Mr. Chairman, if I could. So if they're rewriting a lot of this, will they rewrite it so that there is no difference between absentee and, all of the differences, and it'll just be, I want to vote on the day that I want to vote, not the day you want me to vote?
Right. Well, I think what will happen is that absentee ballots are part of the Constitution, so that makes it very hard to change the criteria. What will happen is that by opening it up and making either vote by mail under certain days and early in person in certain days, less and less people will use absentee ballots.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Amy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Mr. Runyon.
No questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Amy, what's the plan for clearly communicating this out to the public so that they're gonna? Sorry, my kids heard it was budget review night.
Yeah, I will. I'm going to put it out to all of our media outlets. So we'll go on BCAT. It will be in the papers. All the candidates are going to get an email from me the next couple of days as soon as the governor does sign it, so that we know we go forward with it. It will also go out in a robocall to every resident. And so pretty much cover all the bases that we have for media outlets. I do know all the newspapers have been chomping at the bit, so they will all be putting out stories, whether it's in print or whether it's on their electronic media as well.
Okay, great. My only other quick question was, I guess, to Paul, in terms of voting on this, should we just say, when crafting the motion, as long as the governor signs
Well, or
legislation?
even to to vote, that you're voting that we can set up either, if the governor signs it, for early voting, vote by mail, or that we would be doing in-person absentees on that week in April.
You all set, Nick? Okay. Mr. Sagarino?
Yes, sir. Amy, do you have a preferred motion that you wish the board to approve, or?
Possibly similar to what I just said, that they would vote to allow to set up for early vote by mail as soon as the ballots are available, and early voting on the April 5th through April 8th dates, dependent on the governor signing the bill. And that if that doesn't happen, that they would still vote or allow to have in-person absentee on April 5th through April 9th. But that's not too wordy.
Okay, did one of you gentlemen get that?
Yeah, that, whatever Amy just said, that's the motion.
Yep.
Betty probably has it down.
It was motion by Bob, second by Jim.
Yep.
We'll need a roll call vote on this, please. Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
Yes.
Mr. Tigas,
Yes.
Mr. Priest,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. So 500. Thank you very much. Thank you, Amy.
Well, thank you once again, gentlemen, for all your consideration with dealing with the voters in Burlington. And I know they all greatly appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Sagarino, back to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the next agenda item, we have Chief Patterson and Assistant Chief Connerty from the Fire Department here. Believe it or not, it's pretty important stuff. This is for the first time in 30 years. We're looking to renew the town's membership in the Metro Fire Mutual Aid Agreement. As part of that, I believe there are two very specific motions that will need to be read and approved by the board. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chief Patterson for some background on this.
Thank you, Paul. So Burlington Fire Department is one of 35 communities that are part of Metro Fire. We've been a member of Metro Fire since 1981, I believe. So just for your information, what Metro Fire is, it's an organization that oversees these 35 communities who provide mutual aid fire and EMS response to one another. You know, a quick example of 2 weekends ago, there was a multiple alarm fire in Stoneham, Mass. 3-family occupancy, and Burlington Fire was to provide an engine to the fire on the third alarm assignment. So that's just an example of what the mutual aid agreements are. As part of Metro Fire, we have a built-in 10-alarm card running assignment. So, you know, if anything were really bad to happen in any of our 35 communities, there's a response plan in place that we can activate to get fire and EMS coverage.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Gentlemen, we'll start with Mr. Runyon, seeing you were a retired fireman.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, the Metro Fire System works very, very well. I just might add that it doesn't limit us to, providing mutual aid to just those communities. For example, we were up in the Andover Lawrence for the gas issue they had there a couple of years ago. But it's a great system. It works very, very well. I certainly, urge the board to support this new agreement.
Thank you. Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I think this is a great, program to be a part of. I guess my only question is, is it like a membership fee?
So there is. There's, I believe it's a $2,500 fee per year that the town of Burlington would pay into Metro Fire.
Okay. And then I didn't notice, and forgive me, Chief, was there a new term limit set on this, or are we going year by year moving forward?
No, this is, Nick, this is going to be another 20-year agreement that's going to be in place.
Okay.
It's going to be beginning, I believe, the end of October of this year.
Very good. Thank you.
I'm just gonna follow up real quick, Chief. The 2,500, is that per year, or is that already built into your budget, or is that, how does that work?
So that, those Metro fire fees are indeed built into our department's operating budget.
Okay, great, thank you. Thank you. Is it a once a year fee?
Yes, it is, once a year.
Because otherwise it'd be, what, $1 a year for 25 years, something like that? Thank you. Mr. Hogan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, what's the difference between the communities on this list and those that aren't?
So mostly, Bob, mostly fire districts are broken up into regional districts. So we are, as part of Metro Fire, we're part of the, Greater Boston region. So that's why we're a member of Metro Fire. Now, to the north of us, you have Billerica, Wilmington, Chelmsford, Tewksbury. They're all part of District 6, which is similar to Metro Fire. But Metro Fire is one of the largest fire districts there are in the state.
But I guess to my question, and I'm not even beginning to have a discussion about, not doing something, but do all the agreements that exist in the agreement that we have before us, as far as coverage and responsibility and liability, are they all the same to everybody regardless of whether they're part of one district or another?
Yeah, so we're gonna, the second vote that the board's gonna take tonight will address exactly what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief Patterson, as you know, things may have changed in 20 years, especially with technology. Are there any major changes in this agreement from the one 20 years ago that, we could highlight or just mention that anything substantial? If it's not, then it's no big deal, but just anything that might jump out after a 20-year agreement.
I mean, the old saying, if it's not broke, you don't need to fix it, type of thing, Jim. The agreements are very similar. Maybe the technology and in the apparatus and, maybe that's changed over the years, but the intent of this mutual aid agreement hasn't really changed.
All right, thank you. To me, this is a no-brainer, but thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Sagarino, anything to add to this before we move on?
No, Mr. Chairman, this is a great agreement. It's worked great for many years. For $2,500 a year, we're able to really protect ourselves in the case of a major catastrophe, as well as mid-range type problems, good-sized fires, and I think it's a very good insurance policy for the town at that price. So I would just ask if Chief Patterson can point out to the board the specific motions that he needs read and voted on separately, I believe.
Sure. So the first vote that I would need the select board to take is just to extend the current mutual aid agreement that expires on October 31st, 2021 to, I believe, October 31st, 2041.
So moved.
So moved and seconded by
Second.
Mr. Priest. Roll call vote, gentlemen. Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
Yes.
Mr. Tigas,
Yes,
Mr. Priest,
Yes.
Mr. Miranda, yes. Well, that's your first one, Chief.
So the second vote that I'm going to be looking for actually pertains to what Selectman Hogan and Selectman Runyon mentioned. This falls under Massachusetts General Law, Chapter 48, Section 59A. For example, the Lawrence gas explosions, Andover gas explosions, we were part of a regional task force that responded to provide mutual aid coverage. So that's a good example of what this general law in section is all about. What this language is going to allow us to do is you're going to give us the authority to really travel anywhere within the Commonwealth to provide fire and EMS coverage. It can even cross the borders into different states. I can read this, Paul, if you would like, or do you want to read this to the board?
No,
You
I
can
don't
read
mind
that,
if that's
Chief.
what it-
You can read that, Chief.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read this in the form of a motion. So the Burlington Select Board authorizes the Burlington Fire Department, including any ambulance or other EMS component, to go to aid any city, town, fire district, or area under federal jurisdiction in the Commonwealth or in any adjoining state in extinguishing fires therein, or rendering any other emergency aid, or performing any detail as ordered by the head of the fire department or the Joint Base Cape Cod Fire District. And while in the performance of their duties in extending such aid, the members of our department will have the same immunities and privileges as if performing the same within their respective town or district. So I would be asking for a vote to accept the motion that I just read.
So moved.
And second by,
I'll second.
I guess, okay, roll call vote, gentlemen. Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
Yes.
Mr. Tigas,
Yes.
Mr. Priest,
Yes.
Mr. Morandi, yes. 500, Chief.
Very good. I appreciate it. Mr. Sagarino has a form that both myself and Paul need to sign off on, and then I'll forward that form to the Metro Fire Director.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much, Chief. Okay. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Update on the police chief search. I think we all knew from our conversations with Chief Kent that the end was becoming near, although none of us knew when. Last week, when we got the official word that Chief Kent would be retiring at the end of the fiscal year. In the upcoming months, we'll have plenty of time to salute the chief for all his achievements that he has had in Burlington, and we know that the list is quite extensive. Once I was able to get over my initial feelings about the news about Chief Kent, I was able to take comfort in the fact that the town had been able to do an extensive succession planning within the police department. Approximately 6 years ago, the town had the foresight to create the deputy chief position, an effort to provide a true second in command for the department, to provide a sounding board for the chief, and to take command of the department during the chief's absence. At that time, there were no other non-union personnel in the department, and although the chief was always well supported by his captains, it's difficult to create a true assistant role under those circumstances. Our first deputy chief, Tom Duffy, was appointed to the position and served the town well until his retirement in May of 2018. At that time, upon becoming aware of Deputy Chief Duffy's impending retirement, the town initiated an assessment process to choose the next deputy chief, with an understanding that our next deputy chief would in all likelihood take over for Chief Kent upon his retirement. We solicited resumes from any interested lieutenants and captains, and we received 4 complete applications from 3 lieutenants and 1 captain. From this point, all candidates were given a very thorough interview skills assessment where they were evaluated both on their professional backgrounds as well as asked to respond to some real life and very challenging scenarios. The interviews were conducted by myself, Chief Kent, former town administrator John Petrin, and Chief William Brooks of the Norwood Police Department. Chief Brooks is highly respected statewide, and more importantly, we selected him to assist us because he is completely independent of the town of Burlington, and he has no ties whatsoever to our department or to Chief Kent. After a rigorous day of interviews, our team unanimously agreed that Tom Brown was the choice as our next deputy chief. Tom was appointed deputy in April of 2018. Since that time, and having worked alongside Tom for several years on various initiatives, and as he has filled in for Chief Kent, I can tell you that I'm even more impressed now with Tom than when we appointed him as a deputy. A mentor of mine in this business once told me that you do an outside search for a position when you don't feel like you have what you need in-house. In this case, I can say unequivocally, that Tom Brown is a person to lead our police department into the future. And with that introduction, I just wanted to let the board know that it's my intention to appoint Tom Brown as our next police chief at the board's next regularly scheduled meeting on March 22nd. And that's the update I had for the board, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Sagarino. So before I get into this thing, Mr. Sagarino, you couldn't be any more spot on. I think Tom Brown is going to be the next incredible chief that we've had. Chief Kent has been incredible, and you're right. We will give him his due over the next couple months. I think that he'll want to crawl in a hole by the time we're done with him, but he's done an incredible job, and I think Mr. Brown will step up beyond what he's already done for the town of Burlington. So me as one, I can't wait to make that vote and give it my yes on that. We'll go with Mr. Tigas. Any comments?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I agree with Mr. Sagarino's thoughts on this. As the chief has said to me, that Chief Kent, that if his successor didn't come from within the department, then he hasn't done his job. And I think he has done his job, and he's done it very, very well. Chief Kent has turned this police department around, the Burlington Police Department around from when he got here. And I think that, again, it's a natural process that the deputy chief should follow. So I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, but I'll just leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Mr. Runyon?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, well said by everybody. Certainly, Tom has made some, some huge personal sacrifices to, earn that position and the upcoming appointment. His family, he's got a young family that, I'm sure misses him, from all his schooling and everything else he's done to get to this level. So congratulations to Tom. I look forward to making that appointment official at our next meeting.
Mr. Hogan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Chief Kent has done a great job with this department, and I'm sure we're going to have a list of all of those things that we can talk about. I know around the state, this is the department that people point to and talk about when they talk about the quality departments, and I'm just so proud that I've had a chance to get to know him and so many more of the members of the department. The chief and I came on just about the same time, as far as my being a selectman and him being the chief. And I've watched the department grow and change, and the esprit de corps within the department is so high. It's fabulous. So I look forward to not saying goodbye to Chief Kent, but saying hello to Chief Brown.
Thank you. Mr. Priest?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think I'll save all of my Chief Kent and Deputy Chief Brown comments for the actual appointment. Obviously, they are both wonderful men, professionally and personally. Just a question for Paul, if I may. Paul, in terms of aiming to appoint Deputy Chief Brown on the 22nd of March with the chief's departure at the end of the fiscal year, are we shooting for just an overlap transition period? What's the plan?
Selectman Priest, the goal would be to make the appointment effective upon Chief Kent's departure. We can go back and do the swearing in. So once we do the appointment, we can come back at a later date, do a formal swearing in and pictures and all the pomp and circumstance that this event deserves.
Excellent. Do we feel as though perhaps maybe we'll be in some semblance of an in-person meeting by that point, or are we going to be swearing in, over the computer like this?
It would be great. I'm sure everybody would love to be back to in-person meetings by that point. So that would be the goal.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I might, and I'm sure Paul probably plans on saying this, but just in case, one of the reasons of making the appointment to the chief now is there's going to be a cascading of positions that are going to have to be filled, hopefully by July 1st at the beginning of the new fiscal year. So we're going to have an awful lot of work to do in the department as far as promotions and appointments. So we need to kind of get started. So if Paul, you were going to say that, I apologize for jumping on your time.
No, I appreciate that, Selectman Hogan. I had neglected to say that, but yes, indeed. Once this appointment is made, it will create a vacancy in the deputy position, which will then create another vacancy once we fill that, and so on and so forth. So it's a great opportunity for other very talented members of the department to move forward and advance their careers as well.
Thank you, gentlemen. So before we move on to the next one, I'm just sitting here listening to all four of you speak, and it's kind of nice to hear all the acclamations about a new chief coming in that has done so well and it's going to move up. As chairman sitting here listening to the whole thing, it's really, really nice for the town of Burlington. That's all I can say is thank you guys for all the compliments made, and have a chief that's leaving that's done such an incredible job. So, all right. Mr. Sagarino, we'll move right on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The main purpose of tonight's meeting here is to discuss Selectmen's budgets with you. As you know, it's a very difficult budget year, and we wanted to make sure that we had the appropriate amount of time at a separate meeting for you to discuss these budgets with department heads. And we got a bunch of them here, and most of the department heads I can see are in the room. So I guess we'll start by taking them in order. I don't know how veterans got to go first. V usually at the end of the alphabet, but Chris Hannafin, you made it to the top. We also have Whitney Haskell is here. She'll lead off with all the basics on the budget, and department heads will be here to answer any detailed questions that you may have on the subject matter that's been presented to you. So I guess we'll actually officially start with Whitney and John, and then Chris will be here to answer any further questions on the budget. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me? This is Whitney.
Yes.
Great. Okay, so as Paul said, we'll start with veterans. That's Department 543, if you're following along in your books. And so the overall increase on the veterans budget this year is 0.76, and that's made up of 4% salaries, level funded expenses, and the special account, which is the veterans aid, going down slightly. The salary increase is due to contractual obligations. As I said, expenses are level funded, and the special account, the veterans aid line, is reduced slightly. As a reminder, the state reimburses us for 75% of this aid, but the line must be budgeted in full, and it comes back to us as a cherry sheet receipt. That's basically an overview of it. I will turn it over to Chris Hannafin, the director, to see if he has any comments, and we can open it up to questions. Thank you.
Good evening, board. Yeah, not a whole lot to really discuss, with the exception of the aid itself is level from last year. We just reduced the Memorial Day and Veterans Day funds slightly, with the anticipation of the last year not being able to do Memorial Day or Veterans Day, and who really knows what Memorial Day or Veterans Day is going to look like, at least in the next year. Kind of looking forward I don't think that we needed that full amount that we had in years past. So that's basically it.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Mr. Priest, any questions?
Not exactly. I just want to say, Chris, thank you for, doing, I guess, consistently tight budgeting. If it wasn't last year, it was the year before that you actually returned money. Your department, used less than what it had was allocated, and it's always appreciated from a budgeting standpoint. That you keep a tight fist in the dollar. So thank you for that. Because I have no actual questions, though, Mr. Chairman, I would like to offer Mr. Haniff an opportunity to either talk about or mention anything about his department that people might not know or be aware of. I think this is a nice opportunity to kind of shed some light on departments that don't always receive a spotlight.
Sure. This year has been a lot busier than I actually thought. And part of the reason is for the current situation with the pandemic. I'm sure Mr. Hogan, as the previous veteran service officer, told all of the veterans the exact same thing that I tell everybody that I meet in my office is the VA healthcare system is not what you remember it as, within, the 70s, 60s, or whatever. It is a top-notch healthcare program. And even though you think you may not need it, it is worth enrolling just in case you do. And if the last year has proven anything, it is that just in case became a reality. And the phone has been ringing off the hook for veterans that have never even considered VA healthcare for the sole reason that they wanted to be able to get their vaccines. And for some reason, the VA was doing it far better than anybody else. So the VA is at a certain point right now where there's zero age constrictions in regards to who can get the vaccine. As long as you are enrolled in the VA healthcare, you can get a vaccine. So I'll reiterate it again, and I say it to every veteran. You may not think that you're going to need it, but most of the time when you do, you're kind of in a jam. And I think that, that message couldn't get across enough, that it's there. It's a great program. The doctors there are rock solid. The VA is thorough, and it doesn't supersede your current healthcare system either. So I highly encourage it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Chris.
Sure.
Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I'd like to know how you got first also. I'd have to sit in the back of the room and be the last person out every night there was a budget discussion in the past. But now you've got time to go do things.
Yeah, I missed the reservation to Eddie V's tonight.
I'll make a motion, we make that up to you somehow. I don't have any questions, but I just wanted to note that Chris is correct about the VA in reference to the coronavirus vaccines. I just have my second shot at the VA. They're really very efficient. And because I'm in the system, I didn't have to go through the process of making out a long application. It's there, the information they need. Half hour in and out on both occasions at Bedford. So I was surprised, but pleasantly surprised how efficient it was and how they were able to get this done. And so if you're in the system and you want to get shots, call at least the Bedford VA if you're listening to my voice. So I have no questions, and congratulations, Chris, and to Jen for the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Runyon.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, nice job on the budget. Obviously, don't have any questions with that. Chris, again, thank you for what you do, and Jen, as Bob noted. And I can affirm what you've said. Quite a few of my friends within my circle have indeed been down and gotten both vaccines at the Bedford VA facility. So quite a few happy campers in that regard. So kudos to the VA, and thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Tiggis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chris, no questions regarding the budget, but my only question was operationally, you and Jen, you sort of answered it already. I would assume you guys are a lot busier handling phone calls and requests and questions than you were prior to 2020.
Yeah, and I would say luckily a lot of it, because of the nature of the phone calls, don't necessarily require like a face-to-face meeting, which is what I was doing prior to COVID. Now a lot of the stuff is over the phone, and most of it is answering phone calls or filling out applications for people online. So it's not like the office is busy with a lot of people here, but it's certainly busy via the phone line.
Thank you. Great job with the budget, by the way.
Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, listen, no comments about the budget at all. I just want to tell you that you are well respected in the neighborhood of the veterans. I talked to the gentleman down in Woburn that's in charge, and I talked to a gentleman down in Winchester that's in charge, and you're very highly liked by everybody down there in the job you're doing here in Burlington. So we lucked out that we have you here in Burlington with Jen by your side doing everything you do. So I just want to say thank you for that.
Thank you. And if Larry from Woburn didn't have high praises as a Marine, that would just be bad.
I didn't want to say his name. I was trying to be good. All right. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Sagarino, do we vote on these one by one, or are we going to do it as a group?
Mr. Chairman, I would suggest, depending upon how the board wants to do it, if you think that there's going to be, we could vote them all as a group at the end and then hold out any board members may not want to vote in the affirmative on separately, so that we can sort of limit the amount of votes until the end, if that's acceptable to the board.
That's the way we usually do it, so everyone's shaking their head yes, so I can see that. So, okay, we'll do it that way. We'll just wait till the end and vote everybody at the end of it. If somebody wants to hold one, we will at that point, okay? Thank you. All right.
Thanks,
So
Chris.
next up,
Mr. Chairman, next up is Disability Access Commission, which is also Mr. Hannafin.
Christopher. Any comments?
This is Whitney again. I can introduce it for you.
I'm sorry, Whitney.
So, Disability Access Commission is Department 590 for those following along. There's it's a relatively small budget. There's a slight decrease in the salaries due to the estimated number of hours needed for the recording secretary, and the expenses are level funded. And again, Chris is here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Whitney.
Yeah, all I really can say about this budget is unfortunately Jen's getting too good at her job, so it requires less hours. So, with that being said, basically that's the meat and potatoes of DAC.
Great. Thank you. Mr. Hogan, any comment, questions?
No, none whatsoever. Just let me apologize. I should have said this previously. For anybody who doesn't know, Jen is also a veteran, a Navy veteran. So there are two veterans working in that office. So people should know that if they have any questions, either one of them will do a great job at helping them out. But as far as the disability, no, I have absolutely no questions or issues with it.
Thank you. Mr. Runyon?
No, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas?
No questions on this one, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Priest?
Chris, just take a hot second and tell everyone who's watching what DAC does.
Sure. So I believe it was 1999 when the commission was stood up by the Board of Selectmen, and basically the mission statement of the Disability Access Commission is to be a sounding board and also a proponent to improve accessibility throughout the town. Most of that dealing with public entities, whether or not that's public buildings, parks, or anything like that. But we also do some type of, I don't want to ever say enforcement, but advising private companies and corporate properties in regards to things that can help the accessibility of of the town and its entities. In the last few years, one of the things that we've really concentrated on is improving our parks, but also partnering with the rec department and providing financial aid towards some of the therapeutic rec specialty programs with the rec department. Just recently, your board passed a request of the Disability Access Commission to help fund the Simons Park wading pool walkway and improving the accessibility there. And the Disability Access Commission, through your approval, has I guess donated $15,000 of the handicap parking fine fund to that project. And I think the project total was about $40,000. So the fund itself that basically helps budget a lot of the proprietary needs of the Disability Access Commission comes from handicap parking tickets that are written by our police force, through the Mass General Law that, again, the Selectmen and the town meeting has approved. That money, whether or not it's a $200 violation or a $500 misuse of a placard, that money goes to the Disability Access Commission, and then the Disability Access Commission uses that money to fund special projects throughout the town.
Thanks, Chris. I appreciate
Thank
you
you, Chris.
taking the time to go through all that.
Sure.
Thank you. Mr. Sagarino, back to you again.
Is the board all set with Mr. Hannafin?
Yes?
Thank you. Whitney, I guess we're moving along to Human Resources. We
Thank you.
also have Department Head
Thank you, President.
Joanne Faustus here for any questions.
Okay, so Human Resources is Department 152. The overall percentage increase is just 0.17%. That's made up of 1.9% salaries and level funded expenses. The increase in salaries is due to contractual obligations, which is an employee moving through steps. Salary for the Human Resources Director is shared with the school, and the split is currently 58% town to 42% school. And again, expenses are level funded. Joanne's here. I don't know if she has any comments or if we want to turn it over to questions, but Joanne, I'll turn the floor over to you.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. Nice to see everybody. And I'm certainly very willing to answer any questions that you might have.
So let me ask the board, raise your hand if you have a question. Mr. Hogan has a question. You have a question, Nick?
Yeah, thank you,
Go ahead.
Joanne. Good evening. This is a unique position in town, and I'm just curious, the way it was split up, is that what the workforce that you've seen over the last year or two, does it average out the way it is 52-48?
It is really roughly a 50-50 split. I do spend 2 days at the school central office, 3 days at the town hall office. But, during the course of my day, I'm fielding questions from, whoever has them, town, school, anybody. So it really is, and it really depends on the day, the time of year as well. Closer to the beginning of school, I spend a lot more time in that office and with that group. But, other times of the year when we're going through a hiring process for a town position, I spend a whole lot more time with my friends over at the town. So it really does average out to be that 52-48 average split. I think that is pretty accurate.
Thank you, Joanne. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Priest.
Mr. Chairman, that was my question as well. So
Okay,
Joanne
great.
doesn't get 2 questions tonight.
All right, beautiful, thank you. So if there are no other questions, we can move along. Because there's a lot of budget items here tonight, so I'm just trying to figure this out, that's all. And any comments? None? Joanne, we thank you very much. Great job on the budget. Once again, you're standing up for Burlington. Love the way it works. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up on the list, we have the Conservation Department. I see Director John Keely is here, as well as his assistant Eileen Coleman is in the room as well. We'll start off with Whitney giving an overview. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. So, conservation is Department 171. The overall increase is 2.2%, and that's comprised of a salary increase of 2.46%, and the expenses are level funded. The salary increase is due to contractual obligations. And John is here to answer any questions. John?
Thanks, Whitney. As Whitney explained, like pretty much every other department, we've level funded all our non-salary accounts. We just do have step increases for salaries. Other than that, it's status quo budget.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Gentlemen, any questions? Put your hand up quick. One shaking his head no, one shaking his head no. Mr. Runyon, Mr. Priest, any questions at all? No, everyone's shaking their head no. John, I'm going to make a real quick comment. I just want to thanks for the budget, but I also want to thank for everything you do in this town. So, and I hope we took care of that situation that we had talked about today. All right.
We will. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right.
All right. So no comments, no questions at all on that budget item. Thank you. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up is our MIS department. Didn't see if Jose's in the room here yet, or Joe. But in any event, we'll turn it over to Whitney for starters. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Yeah, I don't see Joe or Jose on, so I'll just start, and hopefully if there's some questions, we either have the answers or we can reach out to them and follow up at the next meeting. So, MIS, but the budget for FY22 is requesting a 2.06 increase, and that's comprised of a slight decrease, a 1.79% decrease in salaries, and a 6.38% increase in expenses. Salaries were updated to reflect contractual obligations. The slight decrease is due to the way in which some stipends in the department were funded. The increase in expenses are due to increase in contractual costs for major systems this year, such as our Munis financial software, the town's website, and Viewpoint permitting software. And I guess I'll turn it over to the board if there are any questions.
Gentlemen, once again, I'll ask, Jimmy has a question. It's funny. I don't mean to laugh, but the way my screen's set up is Jimmy put his hand up and Nick looked across like, what? I don't know who you were talking to. I'm like, never mind. It was funny at my end, okay? Go ahead, James.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whitney, I'm not sure if you can answer this or not. It's not a financial question, so to speak, but I was going to ask the MIS personnel if we've had any breaches or attempted breaches, and if so, are we doing enough to prevent them? So I'm not sure if you can pass that request along and get back to us on that.
I certainly can. I certainly can, and I should also note that as part of another account, the capital improvement account, there's a 5-year lease purchase for infrastructure, as well as part of that goes towards cybersecurity. So every year for the next 5 years at least, we're making, I think, $100,000 investment in cybersecurity. But I will follow up with them on that specific question and get back to you.
Great, thank you, Whitney. Also, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is, who let Joe and Jose off the hook for tonight? That's question number one. Yeah, Joe and Jose are a big part of ISAC in terms of cybersecurity. In reference to Selectman Tigas' question, and they're very much helping guide that group, that committee, toward a stronger path toward cybersecurity. I know that we are constantly kind of getting those phishing emails and keeping track of things, and I know that there was a not too in the past attack on a water station in Florida, I believe it was, that definitely raised our guards in terms of, municipal attacks. So just in terms of like, information for the rest of the board. Whitney, I do have some questions that I can probably follow up with Joe and Jose about, but just, like Viewpoint going up $7,000 year over year. Just, like what in terms of services have changed that warrants a $7,000 increase in the contract? And then just some other questions around, the Munis modules each costing separately as opposed to one fixed overall package cost and things like that.
So in terms of the Munis contract, those modules, I think Joe broke those out maybe last year, just because there were so many questions about it, but it does roll up all into one cost. And then if we get an additional module, obviously it adds on to that cost. The increase there is just something that happens every single year. They take the same modules and put a percent increase on there. I see that Amy is here. I'm not sure if she's still listening, but she may be able to give a little more detail on Viewpoint to say if there's something that's adding or if it's the same as Munis where it's just an additional cost. Oh, Paul, can you answer?
Mr. Chairman, as I recall it, Selectman Priest, and Amy is in the room, but the initial purchase of the Viewpoint software was made through a warrant article. And in the previous years, some of the maintenance costs were picked up in the first few years of the warrant article. So now within the budget, we're beginning to bear the full cost of that service. So it was a little bit of jump. We were able to utilize some funds the town meeting had appropriated while we're getting the project off the ground. But now it's entering fully into the MIS department's budget, the annual maintenance costs.
Okay, so then just small follow-up to that. Do we expect that this will be the maintained number moving forward? Or do we expect any additional outside of any recontract negotiations, will this be the number?
I'm back in if I can help with that. They do have a built-in increase of 5 to 7% every year in their contract. So there will be an incremental increase in the contract with them.
Okay, does that?
So every year the service, the way their thing is structured, every year the support contract has an increase in it. And I think it's 5 to 7%, something like that.
Do we gain further support services or anything from that 5 to 7% increase?
Well, that covers like new features and those types of things that so we do get additional functionality for that.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Nick. No one else had the hand up. We're all set. Oh, Mr. Denizio. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I just made an add on Munis. The reason it's broken down like that, Selectman Priest, is because that's how Munis bills. They bill for the licensure, maintenance, and support of each module because not everybody uses all the modules. So they break them down, and the ones you use, you get billed for, and the ones you don't, obviously. That's just some more on that.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Thank you. I don't see anybody else. So, okay. Thank you, Amy, and everybody for that report. Nick, if you have any questions and you want to email Whitney, you go right ahead and CC Jose and on that, so we get your questions answered. All right, we can do that.
We'll do that.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up, we have COA Director Marge McDonald is here, and we'll ask Whitney to start it off, and Marge can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Paul. So Council on Aging is department number 541 with an overall increase of 3.76%. And that increase is basically made up of salary increase of 3.93%. So the salary increase is due to contractual obligations and half-year restoration of the second van driver position, which became vacant during FY '21, which allowed us to make the cut in '21 of $25,000. So what you see is sort of the net of returning that position for half the year and the other increases to the existing staff. And the expenses and special accounts are level funded. And I believe Marge is here. So if there's any follow-up questions, we'll turn it over to Marge.
Thank you, Whitney. It's been quite a year. I'm glad we're getting to the end of it, hopefully. When we first shut down, I did not need my receptionist. So we reduced their hours from a combined 40 hours to a combined 20 hours. And they are still working at that capacity. And I don't intend on actually bringing them back up until we begin to start having activities again. The van driver retired in November, and I did not replace her and do not intend on replacing her until January, when I get a better sense of where we're really at and what we need.
Thank you, Marge. Gentlemen, questions? Mr. Tigas, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marge, under the new rideshare program, is that going through you, or is that under the old transportation budget? Or if so, is that going through the Council on Aging as far as budget?
Not as far as budget. I'm doing all of the program stuff, but the budget is coming from the old Beeline budget.
Okay, I'm just trying to find that. I didn't see it in the DPW or yours, so I was just trying to find out where the budget.
Mr. Chair, I can answer that for Selectman Tigas.
Yes, go ahead, Whitney. Thank you.
So that falls under the local transportation line, which is part of the other accounts, which are not in the binder yet. They weren't completed at the time the binders were printed. So we're still putting the finishing touches on a few of those numbers. So we'll come back to you when those are all set.
Great, thank you. That answered my question, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Whitney, you mean those little binders we got that weigh about 75 pounds?
Yeah, those tiny little binders.
Those tiny little binders? Okay. Just making sure I had the right binder. Thank you.
We're just gonna add a few more ounces to that.
Sure, go right ahead. Mr. Priest, you had a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Marge, it's always good to see you. I hate the fact that, we get to see all the department heads during the budget conversation, because it's not a conversation that we all want to necessarily be having. It's an opportunity that we all get to talk. So because this year's been so unique for all of us, especially for you and your department, do you have any insight in terms of what the rest of this year moving into FY22 is going to look like? And how is that going to change your department, if at all? So
it's going to be a slow reopen. I would hope by the end of the year we would be fully reopened, but there's obviously no guarantees. My hope, I'm meeting with Susan Luminello tomorrow, as well as the state on Wednesday for more direction. My hope is to start doing outside activities in the next couple months, get people outside, get them seeing each other again, and then hopefully maybe in June start to bring some stuff inside, some of the really kind of low-key, slow, and small activities like painting, maybe get them into the Murray Kelly wing. Space is going to be an issue. I've only really got one room that's big enough to manage, what we need to do. So things will have to be rearranged. But I'm hoping to get as many activities outside as possible, limited by the fact that I also need to be able to stream everything so that people that can't come can still join. So I'm working on how to do the fitness classes right now and get them outside in a safe environment, not on the grass, but on pavement, I think, just because it's flatter. So I'm looking at parking lots that would have Wi-Fi, so we can stream stuff. But that's pretty much all I know at this point. If we have another surge, then it all goes out the window, but it's not going to be a grand reopening, cutting the ribbon and everybody come on in. It's going to be a lot slower than that. And we're going to have protocols that we're going to have to learn how to manage. People are going to have to come in through one door. They're going to have to check in. They're going to have to be screened every time they come in. So it's going to be a little rough for them, and especially in the beginning, till we all get used to it.
Yeah. Well, thank you for everything you're doing. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Runyon, you had your hand up.
I did, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. No questions on the budget. I would just like to say once again that I'd like to thank the COA and everybody that works at that COA for the amount of services that you offer for the relatively tiny portion of our overall operating budget is really remarkable. And again, thank you to yourself, your staff, Leahy Clinic, Cummings Foundation, and others who also help us out with some of the programs we run up there. You guys just do an outstanding job, and just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you again.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mike. Any other comments, or everyone shaking their head no? Raj, once again, thank you. Mike couldn't be any more spot on what he just said, so.
Thank
I'm not
you.
gonna repeat it, I'm just gonna agree with it. Thank you.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay. Small little bit of paperwork here. Mr. Sagarino. Back to you.
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The next budget on the list is Youth and Family Services, and we have our Director, Christine Schruin, here to answer any question after Whitney gives her overview.
Thank you, Paul. YFS is Department 549, and they're coming in with an increase of they're coming in with an increase of 1.07%, which is made up of a salary increase of 1.13% and level funded expenses. The salary increase is due to contractual obligations, and then due to a vacancy that the department has, Christine conducted sort of a review of the operations and made some slight changes to the staffing, which will result in the reduction of about 0.49 of an FTE. As I said, expenses are level funded, and Christine is here to answer any questions. Christine?
Yes, thank you. As Marge said, it's been a challenging year. We've been able to basically offer the services that we were offering before COVID. We continued straight through. For the most part, there were a handful of folks that didn't want to do telehealth. They're waiting for us to open up the doors, but for the most part, the majority of people continued treatment. Some waited a little bit and then realized it's not going to be anytime soon and jumped on board. We even ran our group program, delivering supplies for whatever type of group that we were running to people's houses, but the group program ran as well. So.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you, Whitney. Gentlemen, yes, Mr. Hogan, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Christine, good evening. It's not really a question so much as this is probably one of the departments in town that people really don't know about unless you need their service. Having been neighbors of theirs up on the second floor of the Human Resource Building for many, many years, I saw the kind of work they do, and they don't have a 9-to-5 job. They're there nights, weekends, and they do some extraordinary work. And I support her budget and what they do, and I congratulate them from still being able to do it. So thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Gentlemen, anybody else have a comment or question? Oh, Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First off, apologies because you're going to hear some children crying at bedtime. There's just nothing we can do about that, can we?
There is.
So Christine, it's good to see you. Obviously, like Selectman Hogan, I very much support your department. I wish that we had some more visibility on it. You folks are consistently busy, and Bob's right. That's not a 9-to-5. And so what your department provides to this town is nearly incalculable. And so thank you for that. My question actually relates to your budget cover sheet. The monies from Leahy for the high school health classes around teen depression and suicide prevention. I was wondering if that was a program that your department went to the schools for, or you worked in conjunction with the schools. How does that work?
We worked in conjunction with the schools. We basically went in and taught a curriculum on teen depression and suicide. Tried to work something out with the schools this year. It was a little bit complicated. So there may be something that we do in the rest of the year. And if we do, then we would submit and get that funding, but that doesn't happen until October in the next fiscal year, if you would. So.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for everything that you and your department does.
Thanks. And that's certainly something, if I did this, it is something that we will, the following year, like this next fiscal year, certainly get back in the groove of doing that with the schools. So.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, just, Christine, I know we talked about it during our budget hearing, but could you just sort of update the board just in terms of the demands for your services? It's kind of, a lot has been spoken about sort of the impact that the pandemic has had on people. And if you could just sort of update the board on what you're seeing just in terms of, how many people are reaching out, comparison to, pre-pandemic.
Sure. We've had since the pandemic, the numbers here have increased a good 15 to 20%. And the dilemma for us was that we were down a staff position, if you would. I did recently get somebody to come in to do some clinical hours, so we're able to really address everything that's coming in without burning my staff out completely. So, yeah. So I don't know if you want more specifics, and I can get you those details if you want more specifics.
Oh, that's great. I think it was just a general sense, people talk about that a lot of the impact that the pandemic's had on people's well-being. So thank you for the update on that.
I can also say we offered a series of 4 different topics, webinars for parents on sort of navigating mental health and the impact that COVID has had. Tomorrow night is our final. It's on teen depression and suicide. The link to the webinar is on our webpage, so if folks are interested. And we did one on sort of parenting, parents self-care during COVID, which is really difficult. Helping parents, the hybrid model and having kids being in school. And now what's going to escape me is the first one. Oh, it was on. Let's talk about the A word, which was anxiety. John Madelman did a great talk on, recognizing anxiety in parents and kids and how to address and get help when help is needed. So we're hoping to continue more of that kind of stuff moving forward. If there are topics out there that people would like to hear about, please feel free to send me an email at byfs@burlington.org. Always interested.
Thank you, Christine.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Sagarino, back to you.
Mr. Chairman, next up is the building department with our Commissioner, Mark Duppel. Here to answer any questions following Whitney's overview.
Thank you, Paul. Building department is number 241. You'll see the overall increase requested here is 6.36. And I should mention, I think since there was a cut of $25,000 made in FY21, that increase would have been 2.76 had that cut not been made. So the salary increase requested is 6.73%, and the expenses are level funded. The increase in salary is due to contractual obligations. And as I mentioned, there was a cut made in FY21, which was made possible by a vacant inspector position partway through the year that was unfilled. That position will remain unfilled for FY21, but some funds have been placed into the salary line to accommodate any needs that may arise from that vacancy. Various coverage needs for vacation, sick time, whatever the case may be. And as I said, expenses are level funded. We have Mark Dupel, our new commissioner, here tonight, and he can answer any questions. I'll turn it over to Mark if he has any comments. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you. Hello, everybody.
Hey, Mark.
Hi. I'm open to any questions you might have.
Gentlemen, sure, Mr. Tigas, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Whitney, you may have already answered the question that I had. I needed some clarification on the overtime increase, or some sort of explanation. Is that what you were referencing?
Yes, exactly. So that the increase that you see there is sort of where we placed the additional funds that we may use in the event that additional coverage is needed due to the vacant position. So that's exactly what it is.
Yep, that answers my question. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Priest, your question. Nick, I can't hear
Nick,
you.
you're on mute.
Nope.
Nick?
No, nothing.
How about now?
Here we go.
Hey.
Nope, you're back to nothing, Nick. It's a good thing we didn't hear that one.
Anything?
Here we go.
We still have it?
Now you're good.
Yep.
This is a waste of time for such a mundane question. So I didn't notice in others' budgets, but I noticed there was a gas allowance for town vehicles in the budget, and it's a nominal amount. I'm just curious, does that go toward paying for the pumps behind town hall, or is that separate for gassing up the vehicles in at regular stations?
Mark or Paul could answer that one.
I'm gonna have to defer to Whitney on that. Or we might have to get back to you, Selectman Priest, on that one.
I didn't hear Nick. What?
Mark, you didn't hear the question?
No, that's for gassing up at the town pumps.
Okay,
We get charged for using the gas.
gotcha. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
No problem.
Any further questions? Mr. Runyon. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Mark, it's nice to finally see you. Since you came on, this is your first go around with us on budgets, and the building's locked up tight, so we don't get a chance to walk in and say hello. So I just wanted to welcome you to the budget process in the town of Burlington, and finally good to see what you look like. That's all.
I don't know if you're bragging or complaining, but
Yeah.
Selectman Priest never sounded so good on his question.
It's that voice again, Nick. All right. Anything else from anybody? No? No one else has their hands up. Okay. We'll move on, Mr. Sagarino.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Mark. Mr. Chairman, next up, we have Public Works Department, John Sanchez here, as well as Rachel Leonardo, and we'll start it off with Whitney's overview.
Thank you, Paul. The DPW actually covers several department numbers, 411 through 491. I couldn't probably do nearly as good of a job of explaining any of this as Mr. Sanchez, but I'll just give you a quick overview. The overall percentage increase is 2.61. That's made up of a salary increase of 4.89, which is all due to contractual obligations. They reduced their expenses slightly at negative 0.52 and increased their special accounts 2.10. And it should be noted that their special accounts include trash and recycling, and so those contractual obligations have increased, hence that. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Sanchez. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just quickly, just to indicate, and this budget is pretty much no different than what we proposed last year. We did try to take advantage of some of the savings to actually reduce the budget where we could. But I do want to alert you of something that is coming in the next couple of years. We mentioned it last year, and we're going to say it again this year. It's trash, both trash collection, disposal, and recycling. All of those have been going exponentially up. So we're going to see trash disposal in $90 a ton. Trash collection is going to go up. We have a contract going right now, but the next one is definitely going to be higher. And one of the biggest drivers will be what is costing to recycle. So I didn't want to miss the opportunity. I just like to prepare everyone that this is coming. We actually were lucky. We had 3 or 5 year loan contracts, so we're taking advantage of those older pricing schemes, but we will see that in the future. And pretty much that's all we're going to say, and we're here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Sanchez. Gentlemen, any questions? Mr. Priest, go right ahead. Can't hear you again, Nick. Try again.
How about now? Now?
Here we go. Yeah.
Okay. I see everyone's head's like, yeah, it works fine. Oh God. The WebEx is going to stop me from asking all the questions that I was going to ask. So this meeting might go a whole lot quicker than. John, well done on couching your accomplishments versus Republic's, being a pain in the rear. My question was around Republic actually. So when does our contract expire? And I guess, without saying do away with recycling, so it costs less, what are we going to be, how are we going to manage this?
So we have 2 ways that we've been working on the budget. If you notice that what we did last year as well as this year, we have sort of been taking advantage of some of the savings that we get from actually renting or allowing people to have second barrels. So we're going to start using those funds to minimize the impact to the rest of the residents. We don't have a handle of what those costs may be because it's still fluid. At the same time that the prices are going up, there's going to be a couple of other places that are opening up for disposal or even for transport and disposal in other states. So all of that's going to have to shake out over the next couple of years. That's on the Republic side, which is the solid waste side. On the recycling side, we also have a couple of facilities that are currently either under construction or permitted to handle recycling within New England or New York. Or even Pennsylvania, which is not as far. And those will actually help the market as well. So all those things have to shake out. We don't know exactly how they will happen. So it's hard for me to predict right now, but there are good things happening at the same time that the bad things are happening.
You're back off, Nick.
How about now?
I should say no, but I can't.
Yeah, just say no, Mr. Chairman. That way I was.
Can't hear you.
I'll just sit on mute. I have to log off and log back. So, John, sorry. So, when do our contracts expire?
Okay, so I believe we have 3 years left on that contract. I believe it's June of 2023. I can look it up quickly. Hold on a second. I have a big book here. Yeah, it is June 2023.
Are you all set, Nick? Okay. Does anybody else have a question? Mr. Tigas, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. John or Rachel, the anticipated connection to the MWRA, is that reflected in this budget at all?
So I'm gonna let Rachel handle that one.
So it is reflected in the budget. So total, we're budgeting for 1 billion gallons of water for the year. 150 million is from MWRA, 850 million we're going to need from us.
Okay. Rachel, you just, the mic's a little weak. I did get that. I just wanted to commend you, Rachel and John and whoever else participated in drawing this budget up. I mean, it's a variety of departments, but it's everything's explained incredibly well. And I think you guys did a great job. You guys went for the best budget of the year.
Ooh. Thanks.
Choose something else. Mr. Runyon, go right ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, exactly right, Jim. This is the largest townside budget, and I think you did a remarkable job coming in at less than 3%, and I appreciate all you've done. Here's what I wanted to ask you, John, though. I've noticed in the occupancy accounts of several of our budgets that we've been able to pretty much hold the line. So I'm curious that if all of the conservation measures that we've taken over the last few years in terms of updating our buildings for energy efficiency, is that the reason we're seeing some pretty good numbers in the occupancy of townwide?
So I will let Rachel handle that, but I will say that there's been significant improvements that had happened. So and that's why you see our projections as they're shown in the budget. But go ahead, Rachel. Maybe tell us a little bit about what we did this year throughout that is helping this budget as well.
Sure, exactly what John said. We've taken extreme conservation measures toward our kilowatt hours and what we use in the building. So as you all know, we keep bragging about it. We replaced all lights with LEDs in all the town facilities in 13 of the buildings. We had already previously done a few others, and then we built prior to that one had the LED lights already in. So we are examining our energy reduction plan that we have 5 years to get to 20%. We are already doing a killer job on getting to that goal, and just by doing those lighting measures where it would have cost us about $500,000 and it was no cost to the town thanks to an incentive through Eversource. So we're going to keep finding those incentives to save us even more on energy.
All right, great. I know we made an investment in solar panels as well at 1 or 2 schools. Are we seeing savings in that regard as well?
I don't have the data on that. I don't know if you do, okay. Rachel, but
no, that would be Nicole Kosher or Laura Nichols in the school department to manage all that, and they do a really great job on that. So I'm sure if you reached out, that they could give you some definite answers.
Okay, great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Mr. Hogan, anything?
I'm good. No, I'm good.
I have no questions and no comments. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody.
Thank you, John and Rachel. I just want to say that all the small departments in town owe you a great debt of gratitude for balancing our budgets for us with all the work that you guys do in maintaining your budget. So don't think that goes unnoticed by us here at Town Hall. So thank you very much for all the work you do on this.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Rachel. Bye now.
Mr. Chairman, next up, we have the Police Department. I believe Chief Kent is here and Deputy Chief Brown. Whitney will start with an overview.
Thank you, Paul. Police is Department number 210. Their overall percentage increase is 3.72%. That's made up of a salary increase of 3.87%, which is driven by contractual obligations. Their expenses are level funded, and their special account increased by 6.8%, and that was due to a change in the contract relating to the uniform allowance. That's all I wanted to cover. I will turn it over to Chief Kent if he has any comments, or otherwise we can turn it over to questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Whit. No, fairly straightforward, other than contractual obligations, a level funded budget. So I'll take any questions, Deputy Chief Brown and I will.
Thank you,
Mr.
gentlemen.
Chairman.
Mr. Hogan.
Not so many questions. I had the chance to talk to the chief, but there are quirky things in this budget that make it change from year to year, whether they're purchasing some weapons or all weapons to be replaced, or the vests. They do a good job of keeping track of all of these things to make sure that our police officers are the best trained and the best provided for. Over the next couple of weeks, as we've already said, there's going to be an awful lot of information on how efficient and how good this department is. But a couple of things also. A couple of years ago, the department put out a pretty good plan and a written program of how they were going to replace or add one new officer every year, and the backup information as to why that's the case. That fifth officer is in this budget, but it's not funded. So we're not going to get that fifth officer this year, so it'll probably show up again next year. So in addition to any replacement personnel, that one officer, that 69th officer, hasn't been funded, and unless us Ways and Means or town meeting change that, we won't see that increase just yet. There are a couple of mental health workers who were working with us through a grant. Those grants are running out, so we're going to be funding those positions. And with all the things going on, the chief has said that those positions have become very valuable, not to replace any police officers, but to support the police officers in dealing with the myriad of issues that come up. So I support this budget right down the line. I know that Tom was very involved in this this year, and I also want to note that they've level funded their overtime budget for the third straight year. Now, I know for many years, those not just with the police department, but they were using a lot in overtime. The chief has been able to level fund that again, third year in a row. So thank you for the work on that, chief. And that'll be it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you. Jim, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hogan, thank you for touching upon the mental health issue. We hear a lot of talk about police reform these days, especially with one of the areas is regarding mental health. When you look at towns around us, the towns around us have full-time mental health units, full-time mental health clinicians. This mental health unit, they deal, not just mental health issues. They deal with hoarding. They deal with alcohol addiction. They deal with substance abuse disorders, involved in crisis intervention, suicidal persons who are threatening or have attempted suicide. It's just a variety of mental health issues that my opinion, based on my experience as a police officer and as a selectman, I think that we can do more. I think the town of Burlington, the residents, deserve more than a 19-hour-a-week mental health unit. I don't know if this can be amended and brought back, but what I'm thinking, well, what I thought, we lost one of those support personnel through resignation. She resigned for personal reasons. It's the same amount of hours that the mental health clinician currently works. I would like to see us, it wouldn't impact us financially that much, because what we would do, I'd like to see one unit, one person absorbing those duties, taking an all-encompassing approach upon mental health, because 19 hours, like I said, 19 hours a week isn't enough. In fact, in talking to a couple of officers today, there was a situation where the mental health clinician had to go with an officer and spent the entire day down there because of suicidal ideations. I am requesting, or I'd like to see us take a step in the right direction to move forward and try to do this form of police reform by creating full-time mental health resources through the police department for the town of Burlington, for the residents, because a lot of calls come to the police department that go to the mental health clinician. In fact, I know our mental health clinician also assists the fire department, as well as taking referrals from the Council on Aging. I'm putting that up for discussion, but I would like to see this come back with a full-time mental health unit. And in addition, actually, an added benefit of that, if you have a full-time mental health unit, there's a potential that we could take on graduate students who are as interns, unpaid interns. So theoretically, if we went with a full-time person, we could be getting a full-time and a half person, a person and a half for the price of one. So I'm requesting through Mr. Sagarino that the chief and the deputy chief try to incorporate my thoughts and request into this budget if possible. And I'll leave it at that for now and let everybody else talk.
Thank you. Anybody else? Mr. Priest? You're off. Ooh, I heard that.
How about now?
Now you're good.
Okay. So question number one dovetails into Selectman Tigges' question. So just, I guess, a point of edification. How does the mental health individual through the department currently work with other departments within the town? So youth and family services, the school system.
I'm going to turn this over to Deputy Chief Brown. That was his end of the budget on this. So, Tom?
Yeah, so Mr. Priest, right now, Karen, our mental health clinician or counselor, she works, she first of all is a bridge through the Burlington Youth and Families. She's also on the on-call list for the schools and intervention. And I know she's helped out with the fire department and different departments as well. So she's basically on call at any point in time, and she's here every day. And she's also right now attending and trying to get certification as a trauma interventionist, but very well known throughout other town departments. And we see a lot of referrals come in from other departments almost on a daily basis, including the schools.
You're off again, Nick.
And that I'm playing with my microphone.
There you go.
Okay. I ask because, as it seems like as we grow as a community, there's becoming a lot more crosstalk between our departments. And I think the more that we're, co-collaborating or crossing, co-utilizing resources where possible, I think those kinds of things will be very beneficial. My annoying question of the night, you ready? I noticed on the initial breakdown, there were 7 listed traffic supervisors, which equated to 3.14 full-time equivalents. But then on page 29 of this document, I noticed under traffic supervisors clothing listed, there were 8 supervisors listed. And I was just curious as to how that breaks down, if I was missing something or, otherwise, like everyone said tonight, the budget, it looks fantastic. And I appreciate your department as well as other departments making a very concerted effort to keep any increase extremely low, if not completely level. It was just, as I was reviewing, it's one thing that just popped out to me.
I think what you're seeing, Nick, is there's 8 traffic supervisors listed. One is zeroed out. And that zeroed out one is the high school pays that, so we don't put it in our budget, but we still have to get them uniforms.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, anybody else? Mike? Or Bob? Or shaking the head, no? Okay, Chief, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think you might have a running for Mr. Sanchez's, report. You guys had a little conversation about whose was better.
Well, we appreciate the kind remarks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up, we have the fire department. I know that we have Chief Patterson is here as well as Assistant Chief Connerty, and we'll start with Whitney.
Thank you, Paul. Fire is Department 220. So overall increase here is 1.19%, and that's made up of a salary increase of 1.25%, a slight expenses increase at 0.8%, and the special accounts are level funded. So the salary increase of 1.25% is just due to the step increases. The rates for FY22 are not yet settled. So if and when those become settled, that those funds will be transferred in from negotiated settlements. The slight increase in the expense budget comes from the restoration of some funds that were cut in FY21. And as I said, special accounts are level funded. And Chief Patterson is here for any comments or questions. So I'll turn it over to him. Chief Patterson?
Thank you, Whitney. I mean, Whitney pretty much described our proposal. The only thing that I really increased was under materials and supplies. Obviously, we with the new station, Station 2, we have 7 members down there working out of Station 2, and I increased our building supplies by $5,000. That was the only change as far as expenses and special accounts. Everything else was level funded.
Thank you, Chief. Gentlemen, any questions? Put your hand up quickly or, go ahead, Mr. Priest.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I can hear you, Nick.
Oh, this is.
I'm just kidding. I could hear you that time.
Could you? That was.
I had to do it sooner or later. Go right ahead. You're up.
With my own technology here. Chief, just quickly, how does staffing the trainees work? So, we say we're going to take on a trainee who maybe hasn't gone through the academy yet. At what point do they come onto the payroll?
Sure. So typically a new hire comes onto the payroll their first day in the Mass Fire Academy. So for instance, we just appointed our dispatcher Cardwell to the position of firefighter paramedic. He does not begin the fire academy until August. So his first day of firefighter paramedic pay will not begin until that August date. And that's typically the way it works for our department. There are times that we may bring someone on prior to them going to the Mass Fire Academy, but in recent years, it's only been a couple of weeks prior to them going to the academy.
Thank you, Chief.
Sure.
Mr. Runyon.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chief, certainly can't complain with a budget increase request of 1.2%. Well done there. I just wanted to point out on the cover sheet there, you list quite a few grants and gifts at the bottom of the cover sheet page. Pretty impressive, really, in my opinion. So kudos to you and Assistant Chief Connerty for keeping your eyes and ears open for those opportunities. So thank you very much.
Sure. We get help from our members, within our own department. For example, the EOPS and DFS Firefighter Safety Equipment Grant. I worked along with firefighter Michael Morgan in order to put this together. So hopefully we're going to be getting a positive response back from the state shortly on that one. But any opportunity we can take to apply for a grant, where we're going to do it.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions? Any comments? Nothing? Thank you, Chief Patterson.
Thank you. Can we also discuss some emergency management at this time?
Mr. Sagarino, we're here for the budget.
Yes, Chief.
Yep.
Absolutely, please
Go
do.
ahead.
Okay. So, I mean, emergency management is a relatively small budget. We're requesting an overall increase of 0% once again this year. I know you probably don't have the numbers, you may not have the numbers in front of you, but the total budget for emergency management is $23,600.
All right, gentlemen, just for point of order, I'm going to stand in for the chairman until he returns. Okay, any questions? I have a question on this, but does anybody else have any questions regarding emergency management? No? Chief Patterson, I have a question for you. Or maybe even Mr. Sagarino, Mr. Denizio. Is there a law, or is there any reason why emergency management is it's a separate budget and it doesn't fall under or within the fire department?
Selectman Tiggis, as I recall, Chief, and then you can follow up on this. Emergency management sort of harkens back to the old civil defense days. I think in many communities, the department was called civil defense. I think it's a separate chapter of Mass General Law. That's about as much as I know about it at this point. It's something every community has. And I do believe at some point we probably could fold it in as a division of the fire department, but up until at least 10 years or so ago, we had a separate individual outside of the fire department who was in charge of the emergency management. So I think by folding it into the fire department, that might be maybe a good place for it long term. But it would sort of eliminate our ability to sort of do something different with that going forward. Chief, do you have any additional information as to the origins of emergency management? That's how I recall it, as a civil defense function going way back.
Yeah, no, Mr. Sagarino, you're correct. That's the way it is. Under Massachusetts general law, a emergency manager is required for each community in the Commonwealth. So this emergency management is something that we took under the umbrella of the fire department roughly maybe 5 or 6 years ago.
Mr. Chairman, may I add just one thing, that you have to report it separately on the end of year report that we do for spending for the state, because in the UMass accounting system that governs the state of Mass, they have a separate department code for that. So it's broken out differently on a reporting piece that we do. So that's probably the reason it doesn't end up getting merged, because of stupid accounting rules.
All right, that answered my question. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Anybody with further questions? I know I disappeared for a minute, but I missed anything? No? Okay. Paul, back to you.
Thank you, Chiefs. I appreciate it. And next up, we have town meeting and reports.
Okay, so town meeting and reports is department number 113. This budget is level funded for FY '22. Just as a reminder, the salary portion covers the high school AV students who assist with town meeting and the meeting assistants. And then the expense portion covers the cost of printing and the notices for the warrants, the annual report, the budget book, and other related town meeting preparation expenses. As I said, this is level funded, and I guess any of us, Paul or myself or John, could probably answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Gentlemen, show of hands. Any questions? Mr. Priest, go right ahead. Now I really can't hear you, Nick.
And I'm trying to limit my questions now because
You're out again.
anything.
You're in.
Okay, let's hope that holds for 30 seconds. Something that I didn't bother to ask last year at the Maytown meeting that now is dawning on me was the AV cost of having to do town meeting out on the football field versus in the auditorium. And knowing that this is level funded, do we anticipate having to do that again for May this year? And knowing that we've been kind of doing remote town meetings and then the poorer weather, and B, did all of that fall into the budget as it is levelly funded?
Nick, that was, as you remember, it was a great production put on by our moderator and our town clerk, and it cost quite a penny at the time and was eligible for CARES funding. So that was covered under federal funds in order for us to have that town meeting. In my discussions with the town clerk, in her discussions with the town moderator, they have indicated to me that their intention is to move forward with another virtual or partially virtual town meeting as we've done for the last couple of times. So we didn't feel as though that grand production on the field, which was very necessary at the time and was probably one of the greatest town meetings we ever had, at least in terms of people being able to see and hear things. That's probably not something we'd be able to sustain going forward, although it would have been great to. But so we're looking at a virtual meeting, and this is more of our typical budget for these line items.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you. Anybody else? No? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Paul, Whitney. Moving right along. Mr. Sagarino?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Next up is the town administrator selectman budget.
Okay, so town administrator selectman is department number 122. You'll see that the overall increase requested is 3.7%, which would have been 2.92% without the $5,000 reduction made in FY21. This is made up of a salary requested increase of 4.1%, and the expenses and special accounts are level funded. And any of us here can probably answer any questions that you might have about that. Thank you.
Gentlemen, raise show of hands. Jimmy, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question. There's an item listed as offset to Grandview. Can you just clarify what that is to me?
Thank you, Selectman Tigas. As you're aware, personnel in the Selectman's office manages the Grandview facility when we're renting it out. And as a result of that, we charge a portion of that employee's salary to the Grandview where we collect the rental fees for renting out that facility as part of the revolving fund.
All right, thank you. All set, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Priest? Nope, nothing. Nope. Nope.
For the love of God. How about now?
Absolutely.
Okay. Sweet, merciful baby Zeus. So, Paul, in terms of Melissa's role as Economic Development Director, we're now fully, like, I know that the initial warrant article, the impetus for that, covered a portion of the initial startup salary, but her position's fully absorbed into that budget now.
Through the great efforts of John and Whitney, we were able to provide some additional funding for the Economic Development Director within this budget. I think from being as an ED liaison, Melissa has a lot of things going on, and she could use a lot of assistance in a lot of areas. And to make matters worse, she's coming from Lexington, which is a community which provides tons of budget money for things. So she's easing into her new role of Burlington frugality. And I think that John and Whitney have done a great job of providing her as much funding as we reasonably can. And it is something that we will need to look towards increasing as we move forward into the future. She has a lot of great ideas, and there's a lot of great things that I think that she can do with additional funding. And I think we'd like to be able to provide some of that in the future.
Paul, can I just add one thing to that? If I understood, Nick, if I understood your question correctly, at the end it kind of cut out, but were you saying is her position fully funded now in the operating budget and no longer in the warrant article? Yes. So yeah, it is. It's fully in the operating budget now. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else? No one's saying anything, so, okay, we're good there. Thank you, Whitney, again. Paul, back to you.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, the next budget is a legal budget.
Okay, Whitney? Whitney, you're on mute. You.
Whitney?
Sorry about that. I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Legal is Department 151. This budget is level funded for FY21. It covers expenses for legal services for the general government, collective bargaining, cable television, and tax title. We sort of itemize all those out, but they all roll up into one expense line for all legal expenses. And we're here to answer any questions that you might have.
I'm assuming, Mr. Runyon, go right ahead.
I do have one quick question. I know the increase in legal during contract years for cable television. I guess my question would be is that you know, BCAT, and we all love BCAT, and we love what they do, and I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but they get 100% of the proceeds from the income that we derive through the cable contracts. In those years where we negotiate, would it be prudent to deduct the legal fees from in those budget years?
That's a pretty good suggestion, Selectman Runyon. We can discuss that with BCAT. And obviously determine whether or not there are any rules against doing something like that, but that's certainly worthy of something of us having a discussion. I mean, technically the contracts are between the town and the cable companies. I mean, BCAT does end up being the beneficiary of a lot of the funding that comes through there, but I think that that's a reasonable item for discussion with BCAT.
Thank you. Anybody else? Everyone shaking their head no? Okay. Thank you, Whitney. Thank you, Paul. Paul, go right ahead.
Next up is Central Administration, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Go ahead, Whitney.
Okay, thank you. So Central Administration is Department number 149. And that's made up of several different pieces. The operating side is central supply, which is basically all the general government office supplies, and central machine, which is the mailing machines, the photocopy machines, all that kind of stuff. And then it also contains the accommodated portion, which includes a number of sort of our heavy hitter accounts, such as health insurance, Medicare, unemployment, the OPEB contribution, all that sort of stuff. So the overall percentage increase is 8.94%, and that's made up of a 0% increase in the operating, which is central supply and central machine, and a 9.01% increase in the accommodated accounts. And it looks like the entire finance team is here to answer any questions that you may have about any of those.
The only thing I finally realized what central machine is. Thank you very much. I didn't know what that was. I thought that was John's Coke machine outside.
I wish. It'd be more fun.
All right, gentlemen, any questions, comments? Another outstanding job. Thank you very much. Thank you, Whitney. Mr. Sagarino, back. Oh, Mike, you have your hand up? Go ahead.
I do, Joe. Can't let this one slide by without asking a couple of questions. I don't see accommodated accounts broken out on the backup that we have. Is there another sheet?
Mike, accommodated accounts, a lot of them are in Department 149.
Okay.
And some additional ones that we call accommodated accounts that exist within specific budgets. For example, trash is an accommodated account, but it's presented as part of the DPW budget.
And Selectman Runyon, within Department 149, those that are accommodated are marked with the A in parentheses next to the name.
Okay. All right, Whitney, I see that now. Thank you. All right, thank you.
And as
So
Paul
let's-
said, there are some other ones in other departments, but those are the main ones there.
All right. I want to focus on OPEB for just a moment. I know we've discussed this at every town meeting. We significantly reduced the contribution last year in September. I see you're looking to fully fund it going forward. I guess what I'm given the uncertainty of particularly in the area of our local receipts this year, when, Paul, is that payment due? How do we make that payment? Is it over time? Is it one lump sum, or how do we typically pay that?
That's done at the town's leisure. So in the past, I think in the previous fiscal year, we made a commitment to not to actually make that payment until we were more certain of what the conditions were in September. I think John and Gary and Whitney can sort of talk about. We received some decent news over the past couple of days on some of the accommodated accounts. I think that we were proposing to fund less in it this year. I think what we also heard at the Ways and Means Committee, there was a desire to try to get back to as close as possible to the full payment. And I think that we just, again, recently got some positive news on some of the numbers maybe we're waiting from on the school department to allow us to ramp up the payment a little bit. But the physical payment doesn't have to be made. The town directs the date when that payment will be made. So that will be up to Treasurer Collector Gary Giannino. And again, if that's something the board's concerned about, we can certainly make that commitment that, we won't wire that money out on July 1st. We'll hold off on it until we can make a better determination at a later date. If town meeting were to, in fact, to approve the budget as proposed.
Okay, Paul, that's exactly what I was getting after. That so we have some flexibility there. This is not a firm commitment by our vote tonight to bring this to town meeting, and we could pull back on that like we did last year if the numbers are not particularly good. Yeah,
absolutely,
okay.
And I think it would be wise to do so.
Okay.
Just sort of hold off on it, take our time with that again.
Okay, great. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Runyon. Anybody else? No one else. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Paul, back to you.
All right, well, thank you for everybody's patience. We're getting towards the end here. I know that there's one more showing, but there's actually two more budgets. So we'll start with accounting.
Thank you, Paul. Accounting is department number 135. The overall percentage increase requested is 1.19%, and that's made up of a requested salary increase of 1.2%, and the expenses are level funded. Our salary increase is driven by contractual obligations. The department, so in FY21, we had a vacancy in a part-time position that was created through a retirement. And we did not, we initially requested restoration of that position, but given the circumstances, that was not accommodated. So that position remains vacant. However, we put a nominal amount budgeted in the part-time line for our request for FY22 in case any coverage is needed throughout the year, with the hope of restoring that position in the future. And as I stated, the expense budget is level funded. And of course, John is here to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitney. I'll just add one piece of info with the added position. We originally had requested it, but in order for us to meet the guideline number, it was something that didn't make it through. And I do anticipate us having some needs, and I'm thankful that there's something in there for us to be able to maybe have some resources for some coverage there.
Thank you. Gentlemen, questions? Everyone's, go ahead, Nick. Nope. Nope. Nope.
Come on. Now?
Now,
Oh my,
there you go.
okay. All for a stupid question. John, so John, I saw that the president had approved new funding, around COVID relief, and then I went digging, and the Mass Municipal Association put out a possible, like, their own breakdown of how the funding might break down per town within the Commonwealth, putting us at a possible, I put a 8.3 million and change. I know this was literally just signed, like,
You faded out, Nick.
So I think we can attempt to answer the question even without hearing it. Nick, we're doing the same thing. We're waiting for some guidance on exactly how the breakdown of that is going to work, how much of that has to go to the school department for reopening, how much of that is for specific purpose type grants, things like that. But we're very, very hopeful, and there was there's some ability to use some of that against revenue replacement, which you've been hearing us talk about since this started. That's really where it helps the most. So hopefully in the next few weeks, we'll be talking about that a little more, about potentially doing something with that in the fall.
Thank you. Anybody else with a question? Mr. Hogan.
Yeah, not so much a question as just a comment. Gary, just came on, as everybody remembers, last year. And the budget was his first full budget, and I appreciate him going through and having the conversations needed, like that position that we don't have right now, that he was able to look at, and the elimination of overtime. And I'm not there to watch it, but I hear everyone saying what a wonderful job that he's doing in the leadership of that department, and that the decision we made to go from an elected to an appointed position was the right one, and Gary was the right choice for that position. I just wanted to say that the budget is good, and I'm on board to support it without any additional questions.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? No? Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Segarino.
We have the treasurer collector's budget now, and I'd just like to point out to the board that this is the second meeting in a row that Mr. Giannino has gone dead last on your agenda, so I think we're going to have to make special accommodations for him the next time that he's going to appear.
Well, I will say this before we get going. That's what happens when you're the rookie.
Well, I just want to say the building inspector came in after me, so I was sort of surprised.
Did he really come in after you?
Yes, he did.
I'll work
Mr.
on
Chairman,
that.
we'll start with Whitney on this, and then Gary's here to answer any questions that come up.
Thank you, Paul. So treasurer collector is Department 145. The overall percentage increase is 0.99%. The salaries are increasing by 1.07, which is driven all by contractual obligations. And Gary has reduced his expense line by 0.91%. And as mentioned, I think previously in FY21, a vacant administrative position was left unfilled and the budget was reduced by 45,000, and that position is intended to remain unfilled for FY22. And with that, I will turn it over to Gary.
Thank you, Whitney, and thank you, Selectman Hogan, for your kind words. If the board has any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Gentlemen, we have any questions? Hands? You're on mute anyway, Nick. I can't hear you right now. No one's saying anything. So, Bob, you have a question? Comment?
No, I was just going to
Okay.
say, maybe at some point, Gary can come back to us. I mean, we're running late tonight, but just talk about his first year and how he feels things are going.
Okay.
Be happy to do that.
As long as we don't put him last on the agenda, we'd be more than happy to do that.
Yeah, I think we have to have an investigation as to how that decision was made.
All right. Thank you. All right, gentlemen. So no questions for Mr. Giannino. I believe we have one. Is that it, Paul? We got seals of weights and measures.
Yeah,
right?
sealer of weights and measures, Mr. Chairman. I apologize. Mr. Genino was not last, almost last.
Go ahead, Whitney.
Okay, so sealer of weights and measures is an easy one. Department 244. This budget is level funded. As you might remember, the expense budget is comprised half of the cost of the contract that we have with the state who performs the service for us, and it also includes a nominal amount for the supplies. The other half of the contract with the state is and the stipend for the staff who perform the invoicing function comes from the Sealer of Weights and Measures revolving fund. As I said, this is level funded. The contract amount is staying the same. And I'm here to answer any questions if you have any. Thank you.
Just a quick comment, Whitney, or whoever. When did we get rid of the weights and measures and go to a contract with the state? Did I take that night off, or?
It's been about 5 or 6 years now.
Yeah, maybe even longer, Mr. Chairman. We had a big demonstration. We all went over to the gas station and watched it in action and all that. It was quite a long time ago.
Okay. I don't remember it. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm getting old. Who were you? Anyway. Okay, that's the only comment I had. I don't recall it for some reason. Gentlemen, any other questions, comments? Nope, everyone's shaking their head no. So we are all set. Now we need to vote on this.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would just ask if any of the board members wanted to hold aside any budgets to vote separately or postpone them. Just let that be known to you now, and then we can take a vote on all of them except for those. We will have a couple more budgets to bring back to you at a later date, like debt and negotiated settlements, which are not yet complete. But I'd really like to thank the board for taking the time to do this extra meeting to just focus on budgets. I think it's going a long way towards helping us keep things moving on our end of things, and I appreciate your time in doing so. But if we could get the vote on the ones that you guys want to vote on tonight, that would be great.
So, gentlemen, I'll do what I did before. Yes, Jimmy, go ahead.
Chairman, just a point of order. I do plan on abstaining from the DAC, Disabilities Access, because my brother is one of the co-chairs. So I don't know if we want to take that one separate.
Sager, we need to take that. We don't need to take that separate, right? You can just abstain from that vote.
Yeah, you could just mark them, have Betty mark them as abstained, and, if the other 4 members are in favor of that one, it could be 4-0-1.
Any other abstentions?
So what I'm going to do, I'm going to read down the list quick, and if you want to say hold, just put your hand up. and I'll mark it off next to it, and we'll hold it for whatever reasons. All right, gentlemen?
I'll hold it for that reason I just mentioned.
Okay, well, when it comes up, put your hand up for me so I can, all right? Vets, DAC,
Hold.
Human Resource, Conservation, MIS, COA, YFS, Building. Which one did you want to hold?
YFS?
YFS. Building, DPW, Police, Fire, Town Meeting and Reports, Town Administrator and Selectmen, Legal, Central Administration, Accounting, Treasurer, Sealer of Weights and Measures.
Mr. Chairman, Selectman Runyon had a hold on Public Works, and Selectman Priest had a hold on Youth and Family Services, as well as you heard the hold from Selectman Tigas.
Okay, so at this point, I'll take a motion to approve all the budgets that were not put on hold. The three
Mr.
budgets.
Chairman,
that were
I'll
not
make
put on
that
hold.
motion.
I'll second that.
Okay, motion by Bob, second by Nick. Gentlemen, Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Roll call vote. Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest? Yes. Didn't hear you. You're shaking your head, right? Mr. Miranda, yes. Okay, so the first one we're gonna vote on. Oh, you know, we won't vote. We'll find out. Nick, YFS, what was you holding that for? Can't hear you.
His wife works there.
Okay. I assume so, but I was just gonna make him work for it a little bit. It's only 8:20. Building Department, Mike, that was you?
Yeah, family member employed there.
Public Works, Chairman.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Public Works, yeah, so I'm staying on DPW.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll take a motion for each one individually, and then we'll vote on that one individually, and then you can abstain from that vote on that particular item, okay? So the first one will be, I need a motion for DAC.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make the motion that we approve the budget for the Disability Access Commission.
Okay. Nick seconds it. Roll call vote, Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Runyon,
Yes.
Mr. Tigas.
Abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Priest? Yes, I heard that. And Mr. Miranda, yes. So the next one would be White Youth Service. Need a motion on that one, please?
I'll make that motion that we approve the budget for Youth and Family Services.
All right, motion by Bob, second by Mike. We'll go down the list again. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Yes.
Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest? Abstain, I heard that. And Ms. Miranda, yes. Betty, you got those two? Okay. DPW, I need a motion for that one.
I'll make the motion that we approve the budget for DPW.
I need a second. Second by Nick. We'll go down the list again. Mr. Hogan?
Yes.
Mr. Runyon?
Abstain.
Thank you. Mr. Tigas?
Yes.
Mr. Priest? Yes. Okay, and Mr. Miranda, yes. Betty, did you get all those? I have them. Okay.
Yes, I have.
All right, great. Gentlemen, thank you very much. That was a very easy vote to take care of. Thank you. Subcommittee reports. We'll start off with Mr. Priest because he can't talk. Do you have anything at all? You got your headset on. You're looking good, but we can't hear you. Oh, you're gonna make twice as long next time. Yep. All right. Mr. Tigas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Real quickly, the audit committee met this past Wednesday at 7:30 a.m. What we did is we closed out last year and basically got a clean report to start this year. And if you're looking for anything exciting to do on a 7:30 on a Wednesday morning, feel free to watch the audit committee. Right, Mr. Denizio?
Thank
Also,
you.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Hogan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Two things very quickly. One has nothing, well, it has something to do with the presentation on the cemetery. But the problem comes from the newspaper Patch when they talked about the Burlington officials are considering relaxing the town cemetery rules on decorations and plantings on grave sites. I wouldn't use the word saying we're relaxing it, we're redefining it and we're clarifying it. But to say we're relaxing the rules, I just think it will confuse people if they heard what we were talking about and what we're voting on when it comes to the cemetery. And also from the police, we had a conversation about the break-ins recently. More information to keep in mind is, for everybody in their respective neighborhoods to keep an eye on people and the odd behavior and, things that they're doing and call it into the police. It's important that we all work together. That thing, you see something, say something. So there's a whole list of things that we can go over at another time. But the police say there's plenty of things each of us can do by keeping track of the neighborhoods, locking our doors, and if you have those doorbells that film things, if you go through it and you see something, let the police know also. So that's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Runyon, anything? Nothing. Mr. Tigas? Nothing.
You already got me.
Oh, yeah, I did, didn't I? And Bruce, we got you too, didn't we? Because we couldn't hear you. All right. I have no chairman's report tonight, so all right, I have a big one coming up to the next one. Town Administrator, Mr. Sagarino. Would you like to tell us about your vacation?
I have nothing to add on to tonight, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Old business, new business, nothing out there for that. So I am going to need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion
Second.
to adjourn, seconded by Mr. Tigas. We got roll call vote. Mr. Runyon,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Mr. Tigas,
Yes.
Mr. Priest said yes. Gentlemen, meeting adjourned.